Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today, we're going to be going over the different Spellement paths added in the latest spring update. Now what I want to do is I want to go over each of these Spellement paths, go over which ones I think are personally better. Obviously you can leave your opinions in the comments below, but I wanted to go over which ones I think are better, what's interesting, and whatnot. Now I'd like to preface this video by saying something. First off, I'm not going to go over where to get the Spellements. The reason for this is twofold. First off, it's possible that it would change since the live realm, and second, we also don't have all the information on it yet. I would like to very much get more information before I actually do it, just in case, it turns out, oh, there's this really easy way to get certain Spellements, or oh, it's changed since test realm, stuff like that, right? I don't want to give you false information that's just going to change in 2 weeks. So I'm not going to go over where to get it. Second, these Spellements are probably subject to change. There's certain ones that may be changed before live realm. This is just a base idea of what most of them are going to be. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. But first off, I want to do something, right? I want a direct letter to Kingsisle. Kingsisle, I'm looking you in the face right now, okay? I want to look you in the eyes. These Spellement effects and these new icons are confusing. And I don't know if there's plans to change it or plans to simplify it, but there are certain icons that are so confusing. And the reason why I'm saying this and the reason why I'm putting this out there is I am 19 years old, right? Almost 20. I am a fully fledged adult. There are certain effects that took me a full 2 to 3 minutes to figure out the effect of. If it took me, an adult, a full 2 to 3 minutes to figure out certain effects, it is going to take a child way longer than that, possibly even never figuring it out, right? There are so many cases in these Spellements where if I was a kid and I looked at it, I would be like, okay, what the heck is that? And then go the other path, not even realizing that I'm missing out on a really good spell. I would really like to see some of these clarified and made a little bit better. There's so many easier ways that certain effects of these can be better. Honestly, today, while I'm reading them, I'm still gonna probably struggle. And again, I've already read all of them, so that shouldn't be a thing, and they definitely need to work on that a little bit. So that's just my kind of letter to Kingsisle. I hope someone watches this and listens to it and doesn't just go, okay, Noah's just stupid. I'm not stupid. Probably. I'm going to amend that with a probably. I'm probably not stupid. And in which case, I'm sure that this is confusing for other people. So again, I really hope you can change that, but otherwise, enough rambling. Let's get into the different Spellements, starting with Fire. So starting off with Fire Cat, it originally does 800 to 120 damage, 75% accuracy, and has 1 pip. Now you can either go top path, which will stay with 1 pip. It'll have 85% accuracy and 110 to 130 damage. A pretty good effect, adds a little bit extra accuracy, a little bit extra damage. Pretty solid. Or you can go bottom path, which what bottom path does is very interesting. It will upgrade the pip cost to 2 pips. So that's important to note. It does 95 to 135 damage, so a slight upgrade in damage, and will detonate 1 damage over time. So for Firecat, I think it is situational. I would probably go the detonate damage over time just because I think that's a really interesting effect and could be very useful in setting up certain effects. Also, the damage isn't that much lower on the 2 pip. I would say the problem with the top path is simply that it just doesn't offer enough benefit. If it did slightly more damage, maybe it would be picked more, but I think that I would go for the detonate. The top path isn't bad at all though. Definitely having the extra accuracy, having the extra damage can be very useful, and not upgrading to a 2 pip cost is going to be useful at an earlier level. Moving on, we have Fire Elf, which originally does 100 plus 210 damage over time. The top path will do 160 plus 150 over 3 rounds. So what that does is it adds more damage to the initial hit and subtracts some from the damage over time. Can be interesting if you want to go that path, or you can go the bottom path, which is the first of many Spellements that I read and went, what does that mean for an extra 2 minutes? The bottom path Fire Elf will do 120 plus 135 damage over time. What it will do is that when the enemy dies, it will do 30 damage to all enemies. Damage over time, I guess. I think that's what it is. So it's like, picture it like this, right? You shoot a guy with a fire arrow. That guy then explodes and everyone around him is now on fire. That is what I think Fire Elf is now. This effect took me longer than many to figure out what it meant, because can I just say, look at this right here. Afterlife, enemy symbol, the new Afterlife symbol, colon, 30, fire, damage over time symbol to all enemies. That is just like, as a kid, I would look at that and be like, what the heck does that mean? Even if I had the help page that had all those icons, I would be like, what what does this mean, right? So I would very much like to see this simplified. It's not that hard, in my opinion, to see it simplified. It just needs a little bit of work to be a little bit easier to understand. Next up is Sunbird, which starts off with 295 to 355 damage. You can either go top path, which will upgrade the accuracy by 10% and do a flat 390 damage, which is pretty good. Or you can go the bottom path, which will do 210 to 250 and extend a damage over time, presumably by 1 round. I would say that either of these can be very helpful. The top path would be helpful more immediately. So at level 10, this is going to be more helpful and is probably what I would go for a majority of the time. The bottom Sunbird, however, can be very useful for later game and also other people's damage over time. If you're duo questing with another fire, for example, having one go this Sunbird is not a bad idea at all, and extending that damage over time can be super useful in certain situations, right? So I would say either of these is really good. I would probably go top path, but it's up to you. Next up, we have Immolate, and I just want to say here, if any of you go bottom path, I swear you're all beta males, right? That is my firm kind of decision here. It is top path all the way with Immolate. If you go bottom path, you don't deserve to be fire, right? Immolate originally does 200 to yourself, 600 to enemy. You can either go top path, which ups the accuracy, does 200 damage to self, 660 to enemy, or you can go bottom path, which is take 150, does 480, and then heals you for 190 health over time. I'm just saying, like, no heal for Immolate, all right? No heal, you hit yourself, you hit the enemy. That's what Immolate is. If you go bottom path, I am disowning you from my audience. Next up, we have Hephaestus, and this is interesting. This is the first in the line of Lore Master spells. So you can see here, it does 5 pips initially, 340 to 420 damage, plus a 25 universal bubble. So it will make all future fire spells do 25% more. Pretty good. The upgrade here is actually extremely minimal if you look at it. Minimal to the point of, I don't know if this is even worth upgrading. It just does 20 more damage. So you know what? I'm just going to say this one isn't even worth upgrading. And obviously this is just a one-line Spellement path, so I don't need to tell you which option's better. Next up, we have Phoenix, and this is actually probably my favorite spell out of any of the new changes. The spells that do this are so interesting, and I love them. So originally, Phoenix does 515 to 595 damage. You can go top path, which adds 10% accuracy and does a flat 610 damage, or you can go bottom path, which is my preferred option, and do 550 damage plus 185 per damage over time on the enemy to a maximum of 2. Now, I shouldn't need to explain why this is super cool, but just to do the math, so that's an extra 370 damage on top of 550. 550 plus 370, I don't know exactly what that math is. That's like 920, I believe. 920 damage. That is a lot of damage, and why I love this so much is it's really playing on Fire's strength that we haven't seen in a while. Fire has the strength of having damage over times, right? That has always been Fire's kind of unique quirk. Well, I feel like recently that's kind of fallen to the wayside in favor of just doing massive amounts of base damage. But in this case, you can see here, that is a lot of extra damage. Like this can also be enchanted, right? So that's like 1200 damage, which is a significant amount, especially when you get the spell at level 33. Next up, and finally, if you are a fire, is Hierophant. Hierophant does 625 to 705 base. You can either go top path, which adds 10% accuracy and does 730 flat, so pretty cool, or you can go bottom path and does 655 damage plus 270 damage over time if enemy has a ward spell. Now, I'm gonna say I don't generally think that I would go bottom path. I think bottom path is more a PvP oriented one for removing a shield and then doing like a damage over time. Personally, I would probably go top path in PvE, but I do think the bottom path actually is pretty cool. It does have some cool effects. So if you want to, you can go for that one, but PvE, I'm probably gonna go top path. So that's it for fire. Let's move on to ice. I'm excited, and oh boy, that took me like 10 minutes to do. This video is going to be a long one, I think. Next up, we have ice with Frost Beetle, 65 to 105 damage. You can either go top path, add 10% accuracy, and do 95 to 110, which is actually a not insignificant amount more, or you can have 2 pips, do 130 to 170, and a minus 25 ice shield. I would probably go bottom path every single time for this one. That is an interesting effect, and is going to be super useful in earlier worlds. Next up, we have Snow Serpent, 155 to 195 at base. You can either go top path, which does 210 flat, and is a 90% accuracy, which is really good, or you can go bottom path, which is now 3 pips and does 175 to 215 damage, plus 2 55 armors. Now, I will say this. I personally think that I would go top path every time for here, and there's two reasons for that. First off, I think 3 pips is a very awkward pip cost, especially at an earlier level, and it's just kind of like to get up to, right? Like, once you get the Skyrim Hasta, you're fine, but that's at like level 30. That's going to take a long time to get to. Any levels lower than that, you're going to have a rough time getting up to 3 pips. But on top of that, and what I want to point out here is the armor is actually kind of weak. 55 damage is very little, and it's not stacked, right? It's 2 times, which means say someone does like a 1000 damage hit, that's only going to shatter one of them. It's not going to absorb 110 damage. It's only going to absorb 55. I personally think this needs a little bit of a buff, and obviously 1000 was a very, very over the top estimate for a low level spell. But my point is that it's only going to shatter through one of them. I think this spell needs to be at like an 85 to 100 for it to be even worth actually considering the bottom path. I personally would go top path every time for this one. Next up, we have Evil Snowman, and this one is super interesting for some reason and super weird. So originally it does 240 to 300 damage. You can either go top path, which will do 325 flat. So just a flat upgrade, really cool, and 90% accuracy, or you can go bottom path, and bottom path will do 195 flat damage, so it's a little bit less, but it's there. Still does 3 pips, and does a minus 60% shield if enemy is either elemental or spiritual school. I don't know why this is a thing. I don't know why ice has like this target towards balance, where if an enemy is balanced, it doesn't do this effect, but I would probably go bottom path because minus 60 is not insignificant, and 195 damage isn't even that bad when you have an enchant. So realistically, it's not that bad overall. Plus, you're getting a minus 60% shield 6 out of 7 times. So realistically, I'd probably go bottom path for this one. It's weird, but interesting. So next up, we have Ice Weaver, which does 335 to 395 at base. You can either go top path, which does a flat 400 plus 10% accuracy, or what you can do is do 265 to 325 damage, clear the enemy's charms, and then do a plus 30% ice trap. Now, the reason why I would go top path for this one is that 4 pips is kind of a lot for a setup spell. Like, obviously this is a setup, right? Clear enemies' blades and then do a plus 30% ice trap, right? That's pretty cool. Can be useful for a setup, but I personally think 4 pips is a lot for a setup spell. For this one, I would probably go top path, but I could see where bottom path would come in handy, especially if it's like clear all charms. I don't know if it's just clear 1 charm or clear all charms, but it's pretty cool. We'll have to see. If it's clear all charms, that's pretty overpowered, to be honest. It's probably not clear all charms. Next up, we have Blighthound, and Blighthound is in a series of new 5-pip spells. There's one for life. I believe there's one for myth, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. There might be one for death. We'll have to see when we get there. But next up is Blighthound. It does 420 to 500 base damage. You can either make it do 505 flat, which is pretty cool, or you can go bottom path and do 455 flat and then plus 75 damage per charm on enemy. This one is situational for a maximum of 4, but I can see this being really, really useful on an enemy that has a cheat with blades. So for example, like say Shane Von Shane, I know this is very like, you probably wouldn't have your ice hit against Shane Von Shane, but my point is just giving an example. Shane Von Shane spams blades, right? So if he has 4 blades, that's going to be an extra 300 base damage to the spell, like making the spell go up to 700 plus an enchant 1000 base damage. That is a lot of damage, you know, cue the Phil Swift. But my point is here, it's actually really useful. I would probably go bottom path, especially since it's not even that much of a downgrade. Like, look at that, 505 versus 455. I would expect this to do, like, based on the past things that they did, I would expect this to do like 400 at base, right? But it does 455. I would go bottom path if it continues being 455. Even if it was 400, I'd probably still go bottom path. Next up, we have Handsome Fomori, the Lore Master spell. It does 450 to 530 and a minus 25 accuracy. Fully upgraded does 515 to 595 with a minus 25 accuracy. Pretty cool. This is actually an upgrade in damage. I don't know why they upgraded this so much compared to Hephaestus. Hephaestus is barely an upgrade, while this is a significant one. I don't know. Hephaestus might get changed, but we'll have to see. Next up, we have Winter Moon, which does 495 and stuns for 1 turn. That can be upgraded to 535 and stuns for 1 turn. Pretty cool. Next up, we have Colossus, and Colossus is actually probably one of my favorites, and 100% I know what I want for this one. So it does 515 to 595. You can either go top path and do a flat 610, or you can go bottom path, which is 560 plus 205 if you have a shield. This is obviously super useful, especially since other people can shield you as well. That's a lot of damage. That's, again, 765 damage for a 6 pip spell. That is a lot of damage per pip, plus an enchant. You're going to be getting up into the 1,000 range very easily. Like, this is an easy effect to do. Shielding yourself, you can do that for 0 pips if you want to. Next up, we have Storm. Now, Storm is pretty interesting for a Thunder Snake. Starts off at 105 to 145. You can either go top path, upgrade the accuracy by 10, and do 140 to 160. Pretty damaging, pretty good. Or you can go bottom path, upgrade the spell to 2 pips, and do 195 to 235, plus a 20% Storm Blade. I would definitely go bottom path for this one. Definitely a good bottom path. Next up, we have Lightning Bats, which does 245 to 285 at base. You can either go top path, plus 10% accuracy, 320 flat, or you can go bottom path, upgrade it to 3 pips, do 270 to 310 damage, and remove 1 damage over time. I would probably go top path in every situation for this one. Again, it does upgrade that to 3 pips, which is an awkward cost, and removing 1 damage over time, not super useful in PvE in a lot of cases. So I'd probably go top path. Next up, we have Storm Shark, 375 to 435 at base. You can either go top path and do 485 at base, which is a lot of base damage, plus 80% accuracy, so pretty cool. Or you can go bottom path and do 270 to 310 storm damage, plus a 20% blade, and plus a 20% heal blade. I don't know why you would want that as a storm wizard, but okay, pretty interesting. I would probably go top path for this one, but I could see where you would want to go bottom path. I would probably go top path though. All right, next up is Kraken. It's 520 to 580 at base, pretty cool. You can upgrade top path, which is 605 flat, plus 10% accuracy, or you can go bottom path, which is 415 to 475 damage, clear a damage over time from self, and a minus 25% weakness. I'm assuming that's on the enemy. I hope that's not on yourself, but interesting. I would probably go top path again. The top path just seems more useful in most cases. All right, next up is Catalan, which goes from 700 minus 25 to 740 minus 25. Next, you have Queen Calypso, which is plus 20% to next spell, and 445 to 505 at base to 485 to 545 at base, whatever, 40 damage upgrade. Next, you have Stormzilla, and Stormzilla is super, super cool. You can do 650 to 730 at base, go top path, which is 760 flat and 80% accuracy, or you can go bottom path, which is 680 damage, clear the charms from yourself, and do plus 115 per charm cleared to a maximum of 4. That is actually insane. That is an extra 460 damage on top of the base damage. So already you're at over 1,000 base damage, plus an enchant. You're getting up to the 1300 range here for a very easy effect. Especially, I haven't tested this out yet, but if you can use elemental blades and clear those, that's super useful. Just do an enchanted and then a regular elemental blade on yourself, very easily get the effect down. Next, we have Triton at 795 to 875 base. You can go top path and do 920 flat and 80% accuracy, or you can go 840 and then plus 315 damage if self has a damage over time. I would say this one is obviously a little bit situational, but I would probably go bottom path for this one just because A, a lot of spells have damage over time, so that's pretty useful. There's a chance you get it, and B, the base damage isn't even that bad if you don't have the damage over time. Like 840 is still a lot of damage to have on a spell, and is still technically an upgrade from the base spell in case you get that 795. So I'd probably go bottom path, but top path is really good as well. Next up, we have Myth. We have Bloodbat, which has 70 to 110 at base. You can either go top path, 100 to 120 plus 10% accuracy, or you can go bottom path, which is 2 pips, 140 to 180, and plus a 15% myth trap. And that's just kind of weird. It's how it works. I guess it's a cool setup spell. I'd probably go bottom path anyway because 2 pips isn't that bad. It does more damage. Whatever. Pretty cool spell. Next, you have Troll, which does 170 to 210 at base. You can either go 230 and upgrade the accuracy by 10%, or you can go bottom path, which also upgrades the accuracy by 10%, so pretty cool. Does 180 to 220 damage and summons a 2-pip minion. Personally, I'd probably go top path, but I can see why some people would go bottom path. I personally just don't like minions in any case. Next up, we have Cyclops, which is 265 to 325 base damage. Either go top path, 355 flat and plus 10% accuracy, or go bottom path and do 190 to 230 plus a 15% myth trap, and there's 2 myth traps. This one's interesting. I would probably go top path, but bottom path can be a pretty good setup spell if you want to use it. 15% isn't a lot though. I'd probably just go top path, but it's up to you. Next up, we have Cyclops minion, and we can either summon a Cyclops minion, which is summoning summon a minion of myth 1 to 4 pips. You can either go top path, which is Cyclops minion, which is 1 to 4 pips and then plus 140 health, so pretty interesting. Or you can go bottom path and summon a Cyclops ally, which is 1 to 4 pips plus 70 health and plus 2 pips to the base minion, presumably. I would probably for this one go bottom path, but I don't really know the difference between the two. I don't know if ally like blades you more and minion does more damage. I don't know if it's the other way around. I don't really know anything about this. You'll have to enlighten me in the comments, but I'd probably go bottom path just from what I've seen. 2 pips is useful, right? Next up, we have Keeper the Flame, which just goes from 500 plus 25 to next myth spell to 430 plus 30% to next myth spell. So a pretty cool effect. Next is Athena, which is 520 damage and minus 35 to next spell. And then that upgrades to 560 plus minus 35 to next spell. So an extra 40 damage. Next, we have Ninja Pigs, which goes from 640 to 690. Pretty cool, funny number. Next, we have Minotaur, which is 500 and then 445. We can either go top path, which upgrades the accuracy and does 20 and then 525. So a pretty cool little effect there. Adds more damage to the second spell. Or you can go bottom path, which does 45 and 445 and plus 85 damage per negative ward on enemy. I don't really know what exactly this would entail. Negative ward, I'm not really sure what those are exactly. Someone enlighten me in the comments below. I'd probably go for top path from what I know. Finally, we have a new myth spell. This is like Blight Wolf that I said earlier. This is the new kind of base myth spell. We have at base 560 to 640 damage. Pretty cool. You can either go top path, which upgrades accuracy by 10 and does 660 flat, or you can go bottom path and do 605 myth damage plus 225 myth damage if self has a negative charm. So for this one, I'd probably go top path because I think a negative charm is either a weakness or a healing dispel, and that one's just up to the enemy and whether they cast it on you. I'd probably go top path for this one, but bottom path could be useful. Next up, we have life, and for this one's actually glitched if you didn't know, but it does 65 to 105 damage. You can either make it go top path, which brings it up to 100% accuracy, pretty cool, 95 to 110 damage, or the bottom path is supposed to have 2 pips, but it doesn't. They forgot to add that. It does 2 pips for 130 to 170 damage, plus 155 healing over 5 rounds. This one is a bottom path no-brainer. That healing is just extra useful, plus does a little bit more damage for 2 pips. Pretty cool. Next up, we have Leprechaun, which is 155 to 195. Top path would do 210 flat for 100% accuracy, or you can go bottom path and do 3 pips, 175 to 215 damage, and activate 1 heal over time. This one can be useful if used in conjunction with something like Regenerate, where it has that massive 1000 heal over time. If you use this, obviously that would heal you right away. Personally, as a life, I would probably go top path, but it's up to you. Bottom path can be useful as well. Next, we have Nature's Wrath, which is 340 to 300 damage. You can either go top path and do 325 flat with 100% accuracy, or do bottom path, which is 230 to 270 damage, and plus a 35% life blade if your health is over 50%. So I would probably say the bottom path for this one is a no-brainer. It still does a lot of damage. In fact, it does almost as much as the base spell and gives you a nice life blade if your health is over 50, which is probably going to be as a life. Next up, we have Seraph, which is 335 to 395. You can either go top path and do a flat 400 for 100% accuracy, or you can do bottom path, which does 265 to 345 and pushes 1 damage over time off of you onto the enemy, presumably. I would say go top path for this one. I personally wouldn't go bottom path in almost any case, but it could be useful if you want to push damage over times off you. I would probably just go top path anyway, though, to be honest. Next, we have Luminous Weaver, which does 370 damage and minus 25 to next spell, upgraded to 410 and minus 25 damage to next spell. So realistically, this one's just a flat 40 damage increase. Next, we have Goat Monk, and this one is actually interesting. Does 440 to 520 damage, and that can be upgraded to 470 to 550, so pretty cool, and 120 health over 5 rounds. Pretty cool. Goat Monk is actually a little bit more useful now. Next up, we have one of the new spells, Earthwalker, which does 420 to 500 damage. You can either go top path and do a flat 505 for 100% accuracy, or you can go bottom path and do 455 plus 75 per negative ward on self. Again, I don't know exactly what a negative ward is, but it could be useful if you can figure this out. I'm going to say top path tentatively until I know what a negative ward is. Next up, you have Centaur, which does 515 to 595. You can either go top path and do a flat 610, or you can go bottom path and do 560 damage plus 205 if self has a heal over time, so incredibly easy to get. You could just use spray or something. I would probably go bottom path for this one 100%. Next up we have Death, which with Dark Sprite does 65 to 105. You can either go top path and make it have 10% accuracy, 95 to 110, or you can go bottom path and do 135 to 175 damage, any minus 15% weakness. I would probably go bottom path for this one. Again, just does more damage. That weakness isn't really anything crazy, but I would still go bottom path. Next we have Ghoul, which does 160, swap half health to self. You can either go top path, which again adds 10% accuracy, does 180 damage and swaps 70% to yourself, or you can go bottom path and does 175 swapped health and then removes 1 heal over time from the enemy. I'd probably go top path for this every time. Again, 3 pips is awkward and the effect isn't even that good, so I'd go top path. Next up we have Banshee, which is 345 to 305 damage. You can either go top path and do a flat 330, or you can go bottom path and do 180 to 220 damage, minus 15% weakness and a minus 25% healing weakness. I'd probably go top path for this one, but bottom path is interesting and certainly is more a PvP spell. Next up you have Vampire, which is 335 and swap half to self. You can either go top path and do 355 and swap 60% to self, or you can go bottom path and do 270 swap to self and clear a heal over time to enemy and then a minus 50% shield. I would probably go top path, but bottom path is also incredibly useful. For this one, it's a toss up 50-50. They're both equally as good. I would probably just go top half. I don't really even use Vampire anyway, and I usually don't use Vampire anyway, but it's up to you. Next up is Skeletal Pirate, which is 430 to 510 damage. Top path is 515 flat. Bottom is 470 damage plus 160 per heal over time on enemy to a maximum of 2. I would probably go top path for this one because a heal over time on an enemy is something that you don't really have control over, and it really realistically won't happen super often. So I'd probably go top path, but bottom path could be useful, more probably a PvP thing. I don't know exactly. Next up you have Deer Knight, and for Deer Knight, I'm just gonna say it, I don't know why you would even upgrade this. I think it definitely needs another path. You can do 300 plus 270 damage over time to all enemies, and once it's fully upgraded does 180 at base and 420 damage over time to all enemies. I would say for this one, like, the base damage in my opinion is more important than the damage over time, so it's super weird that they would do it this way. I actually expected the opposite. I expected the fully upgrade to increase the base damage and then lower the damage over time. It's weird that they did it the opposite way. I expected it to be like flip these two numbers, 420 at base, 180 damage over time. I don't know why they did it that way, but they did. I wouldn't upgrade Deer Knight at all, to be completely honest. Next up is Lord of Night, which does 440 and swaps half, minus 25 to next incoming heal, up to 470, swap half, minus 50 to next incoming heal, just a 30 damage increase, nothing special. Next up we have Wraith, which does 500, swaps half to self. You can either go top path, which is 515, swaps 60% to self, or bottom path, which is 505, swap half to self, minus 25 weakness if enemy has a negative charm. Yeah, I don't know exactly for this one. I would say probably top path every single time, but bottom path isn't like awful. I don't know, it's up to you. I'd probably go top path though. Next up and finally we have Balance, and I am glad that we're getting to the end here because my voice is starting to get tired. I've been recording for 40 minutes now. This is going to be a fun one to edit. We have Scarab, which does 65 to 105 balance damage. Either go top path, which is 95 to 110 damage for 10% accuracy, or go bottom path, which is 135 to 175 balance damage plus a 15% negative ward, which I still don't know what that is. I don't know if that, like, that's not a shield, is it? I don't think it's a shield. You know what? I don't know. It's not a trap and it's not a shield. I have no idea what that is still. For the cost of 2 pips, I would say probably go bottom path. Next up, we have Scorpion, which is 160 to 200 damage. Can go top path, which is 160 to 200 with a minus 25 accuracy debuff, or you can go bottom path 3 pips, 180 to 220 damage with a minus 1 pip to enemy. I would go top path every time for this one. Next up, we have Locust Swarm, which is actually an interesting one. It has 245 to 305 at base. You can go top path for an upgraded accuracy and 330 flat, or you can go bottom path and have a take 100 do 405 damage. For this one, I would actually probably go bottom path because that take 100 is a little bit weird, but it's actually not that much damage overall. I'm interested to see what an enchant would do to this one. Does an enchant split between it? So you take, say, 250 and then adds it to like 640 345 damage or whatever it is, or does it all go to the 405? If it all goes to the 405, I would probably go bottom path, but otherwise I go top path. We'll have to see on that one. Next, we have Gearhead Destroyer, which is a 4-pip spell, does 335 to 405. You can either go top path and make it do 415, or you can go bottom path and do 275 to 335 and remove a bubble. So obviously this one is a more PvP oriented spell. I would probably go top path, to be completely honest, in PvE, but the bottom path is interesting. Next, we have Gear Spinner, which does not exist. That's unfortunate. Presumably, I would say it's probably just going to upgrade base damage. I don't know. We don't know yet. Next, we have Samurai, which is 460 to 540, which can be upgraded to 570 to 650, which this is huge for a Lore Master spell. I don't know what they did here. This seems just incorrect. Damage on enemy and self gains 1 pip. This seems incorrect. Something is wrong here, because this is like a full 100 damage increase on this spell, and every other Lore Master spell they've had was an increase by like 30 to 40. I think this is going to be changed, so don't hold out hope for Samurai, to be completely honest. Next, we have Savage Paw, which again, this is what you should expect from a Lore Master spell, just a 40 damage increase. I don't know what this is. This is crazy. Next up, we have Hydra, which is 230 to Fire, Ice, and Storm at base. There's 3 Spellement paths for this, so that's interesting. You can do 255 to all 3 elements. You can do 230 to all 3 elements, and plus 130 if enemy has damage over time, or if self has a ward or charm. So again, I would go middle path for this one. That seems crazy. 230 to Fire, Ice, and Storm, plus 130 if self has damage over time, or if enemy has a ward or a charm. I would just go for this one, right? Just use like some kind of other type of blade for this one, presumably, or you could just use a shield. I would just use a shield and then use this middle one right here. And especially if you're with a fire, just have a fire use damage over time, use Hydra. Pretty cool spell. All right, so here's the Spectral Blast found in the game files. It also has 3 Spellement paths, so it does 440 fire damage, 365 ice damage, or 550 storm damage. It can choose one of the 3. For this, you can either upgrade it so it does 485, 400, or 605, so just a flat like 50 base upgrade. Pretty cool. You can go middle path for an upgraded 5 pips, which does 455 to 680 elemental damage. So interesting. That's actually a lot of damage right there. Plus 160 if enemy has up to 2 weaknesses or 2 negative wards, which I still don't know what that is. So I'd say middle path is actually pretty cool. Or you can go bottom path, which is the same thing, but plus 160 if enemy has a blade or has a positive ward. So for this one, I would probably go Spectral Blast here and then just use 2 weaknesses on the enemy. That's pretty good actually, because that's an extra 320 damage to that. That's up to 900 base damage, upgraded for, you know, up to 1200 or whatever with an enchant. I would probably go middle path for this one. So there you go. That is every single Spellement change right here. If you managed to get through this whole video, congratulations to you. It's probably going to be edited down by like a solid 10-15 minutes, I imagine, because I did have to do some looking up. It's probably going to be about a 30-minute video, but obviously I'll leave chapters in the comments below and you can scrub through them and find what spells you're most interested in. If you managed to make it this far, congratulations to you. I'm proud of you. This one is going to be a toughie to edit, but that's it for today. Let me know what you think about the changes below. Otherwise, I'm going to go rest my voice. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.